Could you address us on how far the ECO project has gone?
We are progressing well in the oil and gas industry. In order to cover it, I'll start with the upstream and we come through to the downstream. On the upstream side, we are seeing good progress with our oil and gas projects in Tilenga and Kingfisher development area. A few weeks ago, when the Petroleum Authority was celebrating its 10th anniversary, there was a comprehensive briefing to the public. And what is key to note is for the Kingfisher area, we are largely at the tail end. The facilities are at about 97% complete, and we should be having what we call mechanical completion by the end of this year. And then we go into the phase of preparing and testing for purposes of first oil. So there is good progress. And then for Tilenga, equally, there is good progress. Remember, Kingfisher is a small, it's about 40,000 barrels per day facility, whereas Tilenga is the bigger one at about 170,000 barrels per day facility. So a bigger project in Tilenga. So we are largely set for first oil, and we should be able to achieve that by mid next year. Of course, as we deploy our upstream projects, we are also keen on aspects of sustainability, both in terms of environment, social governance, where we have compensated project affected persons, resettled a number of affected persons, and that is largely done at about 100%, full compensation of the affected persons. There will be those remnants who either have challenges with their letters of administration, management of the estate. Usually those we then handle through the normal process, working with a number of other entities. Now, once the upstream is set, so we will synchronize Tilenga and Kingfisher and ensure by mid next year that we are entering production. Now, for us to produce this oil, there must be an evacuation point. And you remember, as part of our commercialization plan, we are developing the East Africa crude oil pipeline and the oil refinery. So on the East Africa crude oil pipeline, we are happy to report that all the line pipes, the different segments, were all brought into Tanzania, where we have the coating plant, and then, of course, the laying proceeds. So the pipeline is at slightly above 70% completed, and we are seeing major works in terms of tunneling and laying of the pipeline. So that work is also expected to be completed in time for first oil mid next year. So we are seeing a lot of work at the Tanga port, Changolieni in Tanzania, a lot of work in Tabora at the coating plant, significant work going on coating the different pipelines. Remember, we have to coat them because this is heavy or crude oil, so it's heated, and that way we must ensure that these line pipes are insulated to protect the environment. So really, on the ECOP side, we are progressing well. When it comes to land acquisition for the ECOP, we've also largely compensated all the affected persons.
Ugandans want to know, when is the first oil flowing?
Like I indicated, the first oil will be supported by the Upstream, Kingfisher and Tilenga, and the East Africa crude oil pipeline. Yes. So all of this infrastructure, the central processing facilities in the Upstream, the feeder lines taking crude oil from the Upstream to a terminal in Kabalega Industrial Park, alongside the East Africa crude oil pipeline, all of these will have to be ready, and that's the target we are working with.
How committed are you in terms of that deadline? Because first oil has been promised for so many years, but it never happens. What's so different this time around?
Yes, so of course, I know there's been that issue of moving targets. This is a complex multi-billion-dollar project. We are investing for this particular project up to a tune of 15 billion US dollars. And part of this is coming from the companies in terms of their equity shareholder loans, but also a portion comes from the debt markets. So mobilizing this financing is not a walk in the park. So we had, of course, at some point challenges with ECOP financing that were addressed. So those were some of the bottlenecks that affected the earlier debts. But also especially the ECOP, you will recall the rigorous negotiations we had with Kenya and later Tanzania. It traverses two countries. So the logistics of deploying that project also did, of course, slow us down and the negotiations with our neighbors. But now all of that has been addressed. All the regulatory requirements are in place. I've told you all the 1,443 kilometer line pipe for the East Africa crude oil pipeline has been imported into Tanzania. There is no turning back. Upstream Kingfisher is largely done. Tilenga will also soon be done. So we are confident that first oil will be achieved.
There are people who say that actually companies like Total, they have been here spending crazy sums of money, and it's the taxpayer or it's the government of Uganda that is going to foot all those bills. They're technocrats stay in some of the most expensive houses in Kololo. And this has been going on for so many years. How much of a debt, how much of credit do you have to shoulder when the first oil comes out?
These oil companies are not operating and working in abeyance. There is a regulatory framework and a fiscal framework that we follow. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda is required to approve their work programs every year. So there is no work that they will undertake that doesn't have clearance from the authority. And then the authority monitors these works and the spending in the course of the year. So there is already that check. But the production sharing agreements we entered with these companies also allow for caps in how much they can recover. It's not an open check. So they are required to work within certain limitations or guardrails in terms of their spending. So there is no spending that has not been approved. So you can't take away the company's standards. For example, an MD, the company has a certain level of standards for how their MD will live when in any country. But the key point is we have done our economic modeling. We have capped where we need to cap. For example, the East Africa crude oil pipeline, we already capped the tariff at $12.77 per barrel, and that it's a fixed tariff. So whatever they do, that remains the ceiling within which they are operating.
When the oil reaches Tanzania, where does it go?
Okay, so like any oil market, we have assigned the National Oil Company to be our marketeer. They're going to market our crude oil on behalf of the government. So they have their portion arising from their state participation of 15%, and then government's portion by the fact that we are the owners of the resource at about 70% of this crude oil. So it is expected that once the oil docks in Tanga, then we will access markets overseas. So it could be markets in Singapore. It could be markets in India where there are refineries. So basically the oil would be destined for major refineries globally.
Okay. And then when you look at the debt that is accrued from this whole project, when is the government likely to pay off? And then you start enjoying the dividend as a whole sum.
So the nature of this project and how it's organized or arranged, naturally, like any project financing, you're expected to shoulder or clear certain portions of the debt, and especially the equity shareholders. But we've negotiated with the companies to allow for an early payment to the government. So we expect that within a few years, the government should also get its portion of its investment in terms of revenues.
Which few years are how many?
So we start operations in 2026. We are confident by 2027, 2028, we should start enjoying the revenues from the project.